The Rare Slot Podcast is part of the Booster Pack Network. For more TCG-related content, visit theboosterpacknetwork.com. Hosting for this show is sponsored by Category 1 Games, the go-to shop for all of your classic TCG needs. Find your favorites or discover something new at category1games.com.
Hello and welcome to Rare Slot. My name is Rands and this is the show on the Booster Pack Network where we can have casual conversations about trading card game related topics in a format-free way that we can't do on the other shows on this network. Now, today's episode is a topic-based one, and that could have been a topic that is chosen by me, which in this case it was. It could have been something else that you guys suggest. If you ever want to suggest a topic, feel free to let us know via the comments on YouTube or even email us via the email listed in the description of this episode. Or perhaps it's something going on in the trading card game space around us, which of course it actually is as well in this case. Now, the theme for today's episode is change, and if you're watching on YouTube, you will have already noticed that there has been some changes to this very show if you've watched it before. And if you're listening just to it audio, you've probably noticed a change in room tone for the audio already. That is of course because I personally am going through some changes in my life, and that inspired this particular topic today. Now, change is all around us in our world, whether that's something that has changed more recently because of the coronavirus pandemic or some other factor as well. It could be the way we shop for our groceries, or the way we interact with people in public, or even order coffee nowadays, or, you know, fast food. Everything has changed drastically in the last sort of 5 or 6 years. And of course, that change also impacts the trading card game space. Now, our favorite games, trading card games, are constantly full of change. Whether it's formats changing, metas changing, or of course the card pool changing with each and every release, change is something we expect as trading card game players. Now, as change comes through and enters our games, some of it is good and some of it is bad. Now, the change I want to talk about today is not any specific games change or anything like that. It's more of a general overview of the change that has impacted the trading card game space and industry specifically. And to talk to this subject, I've invited a good friend on, somebody who I have deep respect for, who is actually leading a company that creates and manufactures a trading card game, that is Genesis Battle of Champions. Yes, I am delighted to welcome back to the Booster Pack Network for his second visit, and the first time, but hopefully not last, on the Rare Slot. It is a leader in the trading card game space who I believe is brave, dedicated, and stalwart. Please welcome to the Rare Slot, it is Assad Qureshi. Assad, how are you?
I am good. How are you?
I'm very, very well. Thank you so much for joining me today. And again, I think our conversation will be very deep because I want to look at change today through things such as the stakeholder expectation and the stakeholder experience that you have seen over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, and how it has changed in the industry of trading card games. You know, we are few and far between breed of people who create trading card games, and I think that you specifically will be able to answer some of these questions. But thank you very much, and before we sort of jump into it, just in case some of our listeners haven't seen our previous episode together, which of course I would love for you guys to all check out, it will be linked in the description if you want to hear Assad's origin story about how Genesis got made. But just tell us very quickly about Genesis.
Genesis is a tactical collectible card game. A lot of its history comes from my love and passion for different games, but also trying to see how we can push the boundaries, how we can evolve the gaming experience to the next stage. So there's a lot of lessons learned from Magic, from Anachronism, from Overpower, from Diablo, from Warhammer. A lot of these different games that shaped me as a player coming together into its own space. So Genesis, it's a collectible card game until you start playing it. Then it's that miniature war chest tactics game that position and direction and distance, all those things start mattering, and takes you to that next level of gaming.
I love that, and I love Genesis as well because I feel like, to speak to what you just said, it is a sort of a TCG rule set melting pot of so much greatness. And I think, you know, those of us who love our societies, obviously the more influences, the more things that we can put into it, the greater results we get, because the greater experiences we have. Now, let's talk about our subject today. And our subject, again, as I mentioned, is going to be something where I want to reflect on experience and expectations. So let's talk about your expectations before you entered the trading card game space. Now, not many people may know this, but you have been in the trading card game space for over 6 years now. You started in 2017. So let's talk about what your expectations were when you were developing Genesis as somebody who was coming in to this space as an independent creator. One of the first of this sort of more recent, sort of what I've dubbed in a previous episode, fourth wave of trading card games.
Yeah, it would be the fourth wave. I definitely agree with that. So a lot of what we saw in this space, I had already noticed the signs of them coming. So my expectation walking into this space, first I thought I had a high expectation that gameplay was one of the most essential things, but not just gameplay, novel gameplay. The experience of the game had to be something that was different than anything else on the market. If you compare Magic to Pokemon to Yu-Gi-Oh, the big three, they function so differently. They play so differently, and that was one of my big expectations, was that was going to shape it. The other side of it was that old adage, just because you make it, it doesn't mean that they will come. Like, that's not true when it comes to business. You have to learn about sales. You have to learn about marketing. You have to grind it. And I definitely thought that was going to be a big thing. And then the other expectation that I had was that once people get into it, they will run with the game. They will build the communities. They will help things accelerate, because it isn't just the person who comes up with the idea. The most important person in a community is the first follower, the first person who turns the initial idea into something worth participating in. And these were things that I came in with a particular mindset of how it's going to be, and it wasn't that case at all.
So I want to speak today. Obviously, you know, you followed your dreams and denied the sort of old field of dreams adage of build it and they will come. Obviously, it's about building a community, and that comes from, you fostering this community and helping build that very first player. Now, I mentioned before that I want to talk about expectations and experience, and I want to talk about it from many different angles in the trading card game space. And I believe there are four key stakeholders in trading card games. There is obviously you, the publisher, the retailer, the distributor, and of course, the customer, which is a player, a collector, an investor. And to speak to that, that you just said, there was obviously, you needed to foster a community. You needed to find the trust of that very first person to start building things out. But I would love to know, what were your perceived expectations of players, or customers rather, in the trading card game space when you were first starting out with Genesis?
So it was interesting coming into the space. I come from a tech background. I've worked at a lot of startups, and I know that when it comes to introducing a new product to the customers, it isn't an easy process. It isn't easy to introduce something new and try to get buy-in from people who have a commitment somewhere else. So to put this in our terms, people who've been playing Magic for 10, 15, 20 years, it's extremely difficult to break that bond and to get them to stop playing Magic and start playing something else. That was one of those things that I knew coming in, but it didn't stop it from being a difficult or a painful experience. The amount of times you see people being like, I love this game. I think this is a great game. I'd rather be playing this than Magic, but I'm going to go play Magic, because their friends are there, the community's there. There's something, it's such a tightly knit community that trying to break into that space is just so difficult. And so in my mind, it's like, if I'm presenting you with a better product, why aren't you buying the better product? Why aren't you coming over to this side of the conversation? And it really comes back to, if you ever watch the TED Talk from Simon Sinek, Start With Why, but one of his best lines, and he repeats it so many times. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, right? It's about the emotion, it's about the community, it's about the network, and that is something that takes a long time to change. It's extremely difficult to get buy-in from a large group of people and have that group of people work like almost like a hive mind, work as a community to bring this vision to life. Um, I always knew that the customers were going to be the backbone of our success. If we would ride and die on the love of our community. I did not realize how intense that was going to be, though.
It's interesting you mentioned that. Obviously, we spoke earlier about, the melting pot of your game, and it really does present, at the time especially, a unique trading card game experience. As you phrased it before, it was a trading card game until you got it to the table, where it all of a sudden became a strategy, tactical. You used the word tactical before, and that is because spatial awareness matters. It wasn't something that had happened in a lot of trading card games. And I think you specifically, obviously, you talk about people moving away from Magic, but you also are offering a very unique experience. And I think that that's something that a lot of new trading card games should do, but we don't see in this fourth wave. We see a lot of people saying, oh, it is Magic, but we fixed this, or it is Pokemon, but, it has a prize structure or something like that. And I ultimately think that you obviously have cultivated a player base that has been very passionate because the game offers an experience that was entirely unique in the space. Now, I do want to pivot away from players just for a second. We will come back to them later when it comes to the more contemporary part of the conversation, but I want to talk about retailers. So, as a business owner, one of the most important things that I think is essential for people who are wanting to start a trading card game to understand is that the model is not, traditionally, I should say, the model is not selling to customers. You are selling to distributors who are then selling to retailers. So you are experiencing this business to business model. So let's talk again about expectation, and I want to hear what you thought the early expectations when you first entered the industry, which was in 2017. And for those who might only be new to the trading card game space, it was an incredibly different world for trading card games in 2017. There was only really the big three, and nowadays we have companies like Bandai, we have companies like Ravensburger trying to edge out their space in this, and as well, on top of that, we've got all of these independent crowdfunded trading card games as well. So I want to see what you thought that when you were entering in the earliest days of Genesis Battle of Champions, what were the expectations that you felt a retailer had for your kind of product?
2017 was a very, very different time for TCGs. It was at a point where it could have been the fourth wave. There were actually a decent amount of games that were coming out at that time. We had the new Warhammer game came out. Well, it came out in 2018, I believe, but it was around that time. You had the new Warhammer game. You had Light Seekers. You had Sky Realms or Star Realms, I think it was. There were a few other games that were out around that time. And the problem was that a lot of the stores were dropping those products really quickly. The one thing that is not mentioned, I think, enough about the TCG space, I'm sure it's the same in every space, but I know this personally from the TCG space, is every time we see the wave collapse and we see that downwards trend, what happens is so many stores become burned. They lose trust and confidence in any other product besides the major three. So actually, there's more to that, but right at that time in 2017, when I was coming into the market, we were on a downward spiral. Games were dying all the time, except for Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, Magic. Stores were not willing to pick up an indie TCG. They weren't willing to pick up a game to try to grow. The ones who did were for one of two reasons. One, they knew me personally. It was an emotional connection. They're like, we don't know if your game's going to sell enough, but we want to give you a chance to try to make your dreams come true. The second reason was, I don't care if this game comes out with a second set or not. I want to play this game as is. They treated it like an off-the-shelf board game. and that's why they're willing to carry it. But the the commonality between both of those things was that the store owner was making the decision. It wasn't the community. The stores, I had the expectation that if I could come into a store, teach maybe six people how to play the game, and they all wanted the game, and I turned to the store owner, I'm like, I created a community for you. I got six people who love this game and want to carry it. Do you want to pick up some booster boxes and starter kits to get your community going? The answer was more often than not still a no. They weren't willing to pick up the product because I still hadn't done anything. I may have in the moment persuaded those people to play Genesis or enjoy that product a little bit more, but it wasn't going to create that long-term commitment they were looking for. They didn't want to be left with product on the shelf. So those who invested into the product, and invested is a very key word there, it was because of the store owner wanting to take a risk on what they saw in me.
An emotional investment rather than the fiscal investment that most businesses run on.
Yeah. And that was, looking back, I did not realize of a how much of a risk those stores were taking and how lucky I was to meet those stores at that time. The fact that by the end of 2018, we were in 8 or 9 stores at that time. Looking back at the landscape of TCGs and how much I was hustling or how little I was hustling at times, um, I'm blown away that we hit that number at all. That was a very, very difficult time.
Yeah, I understand. Now, at that time, obviously, to speak to what you were saying, it is very fascinating because what you were doing is you weren't in this boom that we're seeing now. You weren't taking on, a million other games. There wasn't a space where trading card games were thriving in the way that they had in 2020 and 2021. And you were doing something very different. Now, things have changed. Again, word of the day. And what is essential for a TCG success nowadays is you can't just be selling booster boxes out of the back of your car anymore to stores. You need to grow and to scale. You need to be with a distributor. And that is something, obviously, that I'm sure a journey that you've gone on, over your time as a trading card game creator, getting in with distributors and sort of having your product distributed by a company. Tell me, what was the expectations of distributors way back when you started first sort of affiliating with them? Obviously in 2017 and 2018 and possibly early 2019, you were still sort of doing what is essentially the version of door-to-door sales for LGSs. Tell me about what your perception was of distributor expectations way back when you first actually started getting involved with them.
So interestingly enough, I will say the established distributors have not changed much between 2017 and now. Their model is still the same. Create demand and we'll carry your product, which is, it's a catch-22 because we need people to carry the product to create the demand, but then they want to see the demand before they'll carry the product. If some companies break out of this, of course, Lorcana, the big topic of this year, they were able to create the demand without getting the distributors. But even if we talk about like early Flesh and Blood days, they did a lot behind the scenes before the demand came up. The big change in the distribution model between 2017 and now is the amount of new distributors that have come to the scene. The amount of people who grown from either being an LGS and expanded into becoming a distributor, or people who were just in this space, understood it, and are like, I'm going to start distributing stuff in another scope. They had the connections already. So the amount of newer distributors that came out in the past 5 years, that's the big difference. And even now, I'm getting messages all the time from people being like, hey, we've been thinking about it and think we want to switch over to becoming a distributor. We want to start carrying Genesis. Let's talk about that. And it's like, yeah, that conversation is a really big thing. Back in 2017, the idea of an LGS trying to risk it and become a distributor, that wasn't going to happen. But now with the amount of indie publishers who are looking for distributors and the amount of LGSs who have connections to a network of stores, that's where things are changing. That's where a lot of those opportunities are starting to exist. But the big ones, the bigger distributors who have been around for 15, 20 years, their expectations are still the same. Create the demand for your product, show us, prove to us that there is a player base for it, that if we bought your product, we're not going to just have it sitting in our warehouse, because the risk the distributor takes, they're not just buying a few booster boxes. They're not just buying a case. They're buying pallets. And pallets not only are expensive to carry, they take up a lot of space. So they need proof that they're going to churn through that product, way more than LGSs do. So you need to create a groundswell. You need to create this grassroots movement of your product to show that there's enough of a demand for the distributor to pick it up. That's the truth of it. And even when you do that, it's still very risky for an LGS, for a distributor. Talking to a distributor recently, their story was they've been around for 20 years or so, for quite a while, and their expectation is that any LGS that has been around for more than a year is is ridiculous. Like that's not happening for most TCG. Sorry, not LGS, TCGs that have been around for more than a year. Those are very, very rare. TCGs are 6 to 12 months. That's the lifespan of them. So that's what distributors are expecting, and they're trying to figure out, can they churn through their product fast enough to do that.
So, there is a lot I want to speak to there, but I think I want to pull out something very specific that you mentioned. Obviously, you talked about logistics, the actual risk and stuff that a distributor takes on from taking a new TCG, from storaging in warehouse to the potential loss that they will make if they eventually try and sell it on clearance or whatnot. That's something I want to talk about. Obviously, there is a lot to unpack there, but what I do want to pull out of what you said there is, there is a lot of new... there is a lot of newness in the industry. There's a lot of people who have pivoted and changed all sorts of, whether it's LGSs becoming distributors or whatnot. But what I want to talk about is that newness. I want to talk about, and you use the term in there, and I'm going to just borrow the term because, it's probably a convenient way to describe it. But with this influx of what are called, indie TCGs, whether they're crowdfunded or, whether they're seeded companies as startups, much like Genesis was or Flesh and Blood was, how do you think that that's affected in the last sort of between, 2017 and now? How do you think that this new wave of sort of indie TCGs has affected the customers that Genesis is hoping to attract? Do you think that has made people more cynical about new trading card games? Or do you think it has made them open up about trying new things because there is so much more, to use a food metaphor, there's so much more meat at the buffet?
What's the quality of that meat? So the overall consensus, talking from store owners. So one thing to note about store owners, and this is what I love about them most, is the people who are the most passionate about games and who are their brain just kind of ticks in that way, that they love games. They're obsessed with it. They're thinking about them all the time, and they want to play every game. Those are the ones who start stores. You like the people who I meet who are the most passionate about gaming are store owners, always, always. So to talk to them and find that right now is the most jaded I've ever seen store owners become. Majority of store owners who I talk to are just so cynical about this TCG space and are so frustrated with it. There are some who are doing really well and loving it and accelerating with it. But the amount of stores that have either shut down because of this fourth wave, the amount of stores that have, the amount of content creators who were focused on particular topics and then had to steer away from anything related to the indie TCG space and move towards the mainstream games. It's ridiculous. The shift is occurring. We're on the decline of this fourth wave. The writings in the sand or in stone or whatever Like it's there. We can see it. So yeah, the cynicism's there, the frustration's there. Uh, some people are finding great success with it, and that's wonderful, and I'm happy for them. I want at the end of everything, I want to make sure that the LGSs survive, that the LGSs are successful, that they keep on going. Of course, I want Genesis to survive and be part of that conversation and be part of the solution. But the LGSs are the ones that need to survive out of everything that happens here. And the amount that I've talked to that were there a year ago and not there now, that's it's heartbreaking.
It is challenging, and obviously this would be a very different conversation if we were having it at, middle of 2021. The interesting thing I wanted to pull out there is obviously, this is it is another part of the boom and bust that is trading card games. The trading card game history that I am so engaged with shows this sort of exact pattern each and every time, and it's something that you can easily see. This is an industry that is much like the stock market. There are bullish years and there are very bearish years, and we are entering a hugely bearish period for a while. It will come back eventually, but it is very, very challenging to expect success in a market like this. And that is the same with any other business that runs on stock or anything like that. But what I do want to ask is a lot of the cynicism that you said. Obviously, I'm hearing that there is a lot of cynicism out there from you. Comes from not just the indie TCG space, which has sort of boomed and starting to bust now, but it comes from the behavior of sort of the market leaders. So that is the big three TCGs, and especially games like Magic the Gathering, and of course the other two in that equation are Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, but they're sort of a little bit more conservative with their product releases. But I want to ask, I asked before if you thought that trading card game players specifically were going to be sort of impacted or being more willing to try a new trading card game because they're seeing so many more. But let's talk about retailers. Do you think that because games like Magic, Pokemon, and Yu-Gi-Oh have increased their product schedule and sort of have pushed more products to the market than ever before, do you think that that means that it is harder to capture a market or customers? Do you think that's harder to capture customers from that because they are being so inundated with products by those other three? Because a lot of trading card game players are trading card game players who want to engage with a main game and then perhaps split off and try something like Genesis, split off and try something like another indie TCG or something like that. How do you feel that the product increase and cynicism that I believe is coming from also not just indie TCGs but the big three is impacting sort of the rest of the trading card game companies, much like Genesis?
Oh, there's a lot to talk about there. So there are so one thing to keep in mind is that no matter how dark things may seem when you're on YouTube for hours on end watching other people talk about Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, uh, there are a large portion of people who are enjoying those products, who are, despite everything, like Magic, a new set of Magic could come out, and you'll see 100 videos of, oh, this set's bad, this set's bad, this set's bad. But then when you go to the store, there's still people playing it. There's still people who are buying that product. Like the joy of the game is not lost. So that is the light in it all. And when you go to the individual level, it's not as bad as it seems. But the other side to that is, yeah, Magic has released a lot more products last year than the year before than the year before. They're definitely pumping that. Yu-Gi-Oh has been well known for the fact that they do a lot of product drops. Pokemon also doing a lot of product drops. Uh, it's it is difficult being in that space because at the end of the day, what we're this is an advice that a friend of mine gave me, which is what we're as a publisher, what we're trying to fight for isn't will they play my game? It's we are fighting for entertainment time. Every person out there has a certain amount of time, let's say 5 hours a week, that they can budget towards entertainment. Uh, and you are asking them to spend their entertainment time on your game compared to any other game. Uh, Now, what is obvious in this space, and it's the same with like movies, even and TV shows, is when a new movie comes out, a new TV show comes out, a new set comes out. That's when you can capture your market's attention the most. So if your margins are the highest at a product launch and your attention on your product is the highest at product launch, then the obvious conclusion is to just do more product launches. And the more you have, the more you get to capture that audience's attention for that 5 hours a week. The other thing we're seeing is that it's no longer concentrated 5 hours a week. It's not like I get I spend Friday evenings playing. It's 20 minutes here, 30 minutes here. It's on mobile, it's on your laptop. The amount of people who can come to an LGS and just sit there and do F&M, that is starting to decline. It's hard for people to have that time set aside. So the more you can capture their attention in those other pockets, small pockets of entertainment time that they have dedicated, the better your company is going to do. So doing product launches, doing spoiler seasons, doing hype moments, even having bad publicity where you do something and and everyone is in uproar about it. When all of a sudden you're getting YouTube channels that have nothing to do with your product starting to create content about your product and capture people's attention towards you, then you turn that around and do something positive. Well, now you got a whole new audience that is talking about your product. So I understand from a business perspective, from a capitalistic perspective, why these games are constantly dropping more and more product and doing more and more releases. What that means for us as indie publishers who don't have the capital to release new product regularly, that don't have the teams to constantly test new sets and bring out quality product every single time, we have to approach the conversation different. And I've seen this experience in different ways. So what we do is we'll do things like we will work around a spoiler season, or we will work around a release weekend and be like, okay, enjoy your time with Magic, enjoy your time with that community. When the hype has died down, we'll come back to us. Because as of right now, as an indie TCG, as a game at our current level, we have to accept that we are second place. Every player is going to be playing Magic, they're playing Pokemon, they're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! That's their primary focus. But when they need a break from that, that's when they'll come and play Genesis. And that's okay. That's acceptable because that gives us the time to grow, learn, and develop a product that is refined and answers the problems we need to be answering today compared to just dropping more product and stealing more attention. That's something we can't compete on. We don't have Hasbro's money. We don't have Bandai's or the Pokemon companies or any of those other companies. We don't have that much money. So we do what we can and we do it our way.
It seems like a really challenging space. Now, there's two things that I'll pull out there before I ask my next question. So the first one is obviously with the influx of releases from these big companies, it could be a business strategy. It's not just that it's not just beneficial that it is capturing that entertainment time connection. Sort of that entertainment time sort of collection of gamers' attention. But at the same time, it's pushing, the more that they release, the more frequent their releases are, the less time that the customer has to engage with products outside of things like Magic. So if Magic is bringing out a product every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks or whatever like that, you get the release weekend, you get it to be released, and then all of a sudden they don't have time to sort of rest on their laurels, and the player doesn't have, or the collector, doesn't have time to rest on their laurels and think about the fact that they might want to go play Genesis, and that is challenging. And I think that possibly this increased in product scheduling from all of those companies, the major three at least, and sort of those other hangers-on, like Bandai and stuff like that, could be a response to the fact that they are basically bullying smaller independent companies out of people's free time. Now, we don't have time to jump into that. We also don't have time to jump into the digital component as well, because, like you said, you've got toilet games and stuff like that, like Magic Arena or, Pokemon Live now, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Not Duel Links, but something similar to that. Yeah, and unfortunately, those things are taking up that excess time where you would be able to explore other games. And obviously, I'm an advocate for the diversity of games that can exist in the trading card game space, but corporately, those sort of companies are really trying to box them out and maintain their market position. And it is challenging for indie or lower, less capital gaining sort of publishers to be able to capitalize on that space. And I think that is part of that sort of aforementioned boom that we discussed before. Now, I do want to pivot again to speak to sort of a broader sense of these sort of independent trading card games. So I want to know if, because customers nowadays are engaging with game companies in a different way, they're engaging with smaller trading card games, much like yourself, through the idea that they're actually engaging, if they get into the community, with it's interesting. We've seen them go from companies to sort of almost content creators. There is a number of indie trading card games that sort of feel like they are being led by a personality of sorts. Some that have been on this channel before. Even yourself. Obviously, Assad, you are somebody who is, a huge personality in the Genesis community, and you're a huge talking point. I want to know that if these independent or smaller TCG companies, now that they're sort of using different platforms like crowdfunding, so ignoring the retail and distribution model entirely, or platforms like Patreon, how do you feel customer expectations have changed for smaller TCGs now that their customers can be engaged directly by the company, and sort of ignore that traditional three-tier model, which is distributor, retailer, player?
Give me a second to wrap my mind around that. There's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot because I'm in that space, right? I'm doing the Patreon. I am connected with my community. There's definitely a pro to it. And part of the value add here is the fact that a lot of people come into this space with, yes, this is a game. Yes, this is something I want to play. However, what if I'm holding on to the next Black Lotus? What if I'm holding on to the next card that's going to be worth thousands of dollars 15 years from now? And I want to make sure that this is investable. Now, all of a sudden, all of those players are acting and treating this product like an investment. And they have a one-on-one relationship with the CEO of the company that they've invested into. So imagine taking it the other way around of like, Google is just starting out today and they need capital to build their company, and they start a Patreon, and you're talking to the CEO of Google and you're like, all right, so what are you going to do? How are we going to do this? Let's push this forward. And all of a sudden, if you see something you don't like about what they're doing, they're going to you're going to try to push them into the direction that you want. So people have a stronger voice now with these indie TCGs than they used to have. And there's a lot of value to add to that. There's a lot of good things that can come out of that. For example, our marketing lead, Joey, the fact that I didn't even send it to him. Someone else sent him a copy of our beta starter kit. He opened it up, tried the game out. Really, he had some good things to say about it, but mostly negative things to say about the game. And then I had the opportunity to call him right away and be like, hey, you just created a video. I just saw it. Let's talk about this. I want to answer some of the questions you had in your video. That wasn't so much a thing before. And having that one-on-one relationship, you can get benefits out of it. You can get direct feedback and build relationships with your customers, with your community, and things like that. But then at the same time, some people have a really loud voice, and the things they want to talk about aren't always positive. And you have to have a thick skin about it. And I'll be honest, I did not. I do not. It is difficult when I see people talk very negatively about my game, about this industry, and even about my competitors. When I see some people talk very negatively about someone else who's trying the hardest to bring out a new TCG, that hurts me because we just want to make a game. We just want to change a landscape that really hasn't been touched by many people, and be part of that conversation. And it's really cool for me to personally think that no matter what happens, at this point, I can comfortably say that I was in this space for 5 years. There isn't a lot of people who can say that they've done that. And that's a really, really cool feeling to have. That's a really positive, like a positive outcome of this entire experience. But I don't know. I think it's good that the community can have that one-on-one relationship. I just wish it was on kinder terms at times. I think that's a big thing. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Now, what I want to say here is this is a complicated issue. Because, we talked before about people emotionally connecting to these games. These are lifestyle games. These are things that people are like, I want to be a Genesis player. I want to be a Magic player. I want to be a Pokemon player. I want to identify with this community. And obviously, as we've seen currently in the tabletop gaming space, communities can rally. Communities can change things. What's really interesting to me is that emotional connection that people have to the games that they play and the way that they feel like they can persuade or change things. And I think that that is really good that the feedback channels are more rich now than they've ever been before in the trading card game space. And I think that that speaks to what you were saying. I once made a graph that tracked all of the trading card games that had lasted 5 years, just like you said you had, that went from 1993 to 2013. So that's 20 years in the trading card game space. And there was less than 6 out of literally hundreds. We are in a new era. We are in a new time for people to be able to cultivate an audience and directly serve them. And I think that that is really fascinating. Now, what I do want to talk about, though, is let's circle back to sort of your origins in sort of, distributing your own game. And I want to talk to retailers again. When retailers, we talked about distribution before, and we talked about how you were basically, again, to use the term, sort of a door-to-door salesman for Genesis for a long time, selling boxes out of your boot. I want to know, how do you feel the experience of the retailer has changed since you were doing that to where Genesis is now? And obviously that is a big question because it asks, obviously, where are retailers now? When you started in 2018, there wasn't as many retailers. There was a lot of different expectations and stuff like that. But I want to speak specifically to the experience and how your company, which is Haunted Castle Gaming, I don't think we've mentioned them at all yet, has seen that experience change. So how have you seen your relationship with retailers change over the last 5 years? And how has it been managed by Haunted Castle Gaming?
The early relationships with retailers was a lot more of a discovery phase. When I got my first 2 stores signed up, I spent a lot of time sitting down with the store owners, talking to them, and most of my time was spent understanding what their challenges were, what were their expectations, where did they want to see the game go. I had that opportunity to sit one-on-one and talk to them. Then I started talking to a lot of other stores. And the expectation at that time, or the relationship at that time was, we'll bring in your game, but we need to see that there's a driving force behind it. In that way, actually, honestly, I don't think that has changed. One of the things I'm learning right now, like this month, a lot of what I've been learning is that the things that I was doing right in 2017 are still the things that stores need today. They need the biggest challenges stores have today. And there's probably more, but these are the common themes that I hear. One is product knowledge. They need the ability to understand the product as well as possible, because that's the only way they can sell it. The other problem that they're facing is they need a champion at their store who can lead the group, who can lead the community. And then the other thing is just noise. They need marketing. They need a way to let their community know that those things exist. Those are the same challenges between 2017 and now, but the time in between was different. The time during COVID was very different because it was a lot about, why should people care about your game over so many other games? Today and in 2017, it was, if a store is willing to bring on your game, it's because they want to put it as something that's on their shelf. You walk into a game store, you see all the booster boxes of Magic, of Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, whatever games, and they want to put your game up there and say that this is part of our product line, this is part of our store. But in 2021 and early 2022, or into 2022, there was a lot of there's so many games out there. Stores were taking everything. And the conversation at that point was, why should we care about your game more than anyone else? And you had to find that differentiating factor of the product because games were just selling themselves. We didn't need, like, if a store believed in it, they didn't need to be able to talk the game up. They just needed it. And things were churning very differently. So I think now, because we're seeing that resemblance between 2017 and today, it's part of the reason why I'm confident that we're slowly on that decline of the fourth wave, because that's where we were in 2017. We were on a decline.
It's going through a period of stabilization, I think, or normalization. You know, like we've gone through this huge boom that has attracted not just new games, but new content creators, new discussions. You know, obviously, discussions that we're having nowadays are so different to the ones that we were even having in 2017 because technology has made some changes where we can actually talk to things. You know, in 2017, there was probably one game with a Discord channel. Now, every single game is expected to have a Discord channel and have YouTube content creators. It's so difficult nowadays to understand sort of a message and sort of understand sort of the way that the community reacts. Like it is this omnipresent beast, obviously, you know, pulling from a different sort of gaming industry. Obviously, you know, when we're recording this, we're only days out from things like the D&D OGL going live, and sort of seeing a community response to that has been an absolute a jaw-dropping experience, I should probably say. It's been amazing how passionate people are, and that passion is getting put back into those games, and cultivating that, I think, is very valuable. Now, what I do want to talk about now is something that's really, I think, an interesting thing to talk about. No, manufacturing is something we really haven't touched on in this episode, but what I want to sort of know, and you know, even product creation, and you know, from a creative side, like you guys at Haunted Castle Gaming there, I want to sort of ask, compared to when you started, you and your team at Haunted Castle Gaming back in 2017, how has your experience changed when creating a product? Now, obviously, we're living in very unique times where supply chain issues are changing, things like logistics are changing. You know, we mentioned warehousing before and all that sort of stuff. How have you changed as a company when it comes to like actually physically creating a trading card game from 2017 to now?
The expectations from the community has changed a lot. In 2017, there was when I brought out Alpha, Beta, Welcome to Jalara Rays, the first four sets, we had no foils, right? We had epics, which were just extended extended artworks or extended artwork versions of regular rares. But the big focus on the product was this was a game I wanted to play, and people were comfortable with that. Because another big thing to also remember, in 2017, 2018, products were at a race to zero. It was like stores were selling magic packs. It was like 3 for $12 or something like that. Like they were trying to liquidate product, and the stores that were successful were the ones who could undercut their competitors in the area. Then it changed later on where it wasn't a question of who could undercut. It was who was capitalizing off the fact that the prices were going so high. And even now, like the prices for, if you go into your store and buy booster packs of Magic, Pokemon, I don't know about Yu-Gi-Oh, so I won't comment on those. But on the other two games, the prices of packs have gone up a lot. And so because in 2017, 2018, it was a race down to zero. The question was, could we still, it didn't matter what the quality of the product was per se. It was, the bigger question was, what was the price point? How, like, it didn't matter if there was chase in the game, there wasn't anything like that. It was, could I make a good competitive deck for this price point? That has changed a lot now because the standard expectation of what a product has in it is no longer just, does it satisfy the need to play the game? it also has to satisfy the need to have interesting collectible pieces, and it also needs to satisfy the need of having something that's investable. If I got this piece, if I got this hit, then I've got a return on my investment. Uh, I I talk. I've been percolating on this idea for a while, but there's a lot of chatter out there about EV of booster boxes, the expected value of opening up a booster box. And I remember, and I want to come back to this time where we didn't talk about dollar figures in that way. It wasn't I spent $100 on a box and I got 120 out of it. It was I spent $100 on a box. My I expect to spend $10 of like the cost for a movie ticket is just say $20. That gives me 2 hours of entertainment. So for $100, I'm expected um 10 hours of entertainment. So can I get 10 hours of entertainment out of this booster box? And that's the EV I remember talking about as a kid. Do I get my time out of it? And if I got more than 10 hours out of it, if I get 100 hours out of $100, that's amazing. Now I'm profitable. And if I got only 2 hours, then okay, that wasn't worth it. Like those are conversations that don't exist or are not focused on as much anymore. And I think that has changed the way we design our product because now if I were to reprint what I did in alpha or what I did in beta, if I were to make that exact same product today, there's no way I would sell. Absolutely no way. Beta had no foils. It had 18 unique rares in that set and 24 packs per box. So that means in a single booster box, you got the entire set. There was no collectability in beta because in one booster box you got everything. You got duplicates of quite a bit of cards. Uh, so that being said, like those type of products just could not exist in the TCG space as it's. It could exist in some hybrid TCG LCG kind of space.
It's so, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, I think what's so interesting is if you look at trading card games, the history of trading card games had a very unique moment in the late 90s. A company called Outta, which was ultimately bought by Wizards of the Coast, tried to release booster boxes that were essentially flat rarity, and they failed miserably through a campaign called the Rolling Thunder distribution model. And I think that that's sort of an echo of what you're talking about now. Now, what I want to talk about, and this is an improvised question in this because you brought it up, and I want to talk to the change. You know, you've said that we don't now talk about these things as entertainment products. We talk about them as investable products. What is my return on investment, or ROI, if I'm going to sink money into this? And I think that that is part of the industry and the people who engage with this product growing up. You know, we saw this with sports cards, you know, in the 1960s, 70s and stuff like that. People just wanted the cool things they wanted. But by the time 80s and 90s rolled around with things like tops and you know, what is it called? Upper Deck and stuff like that had tons of controversy with manipulating market value and stuff like that. As the audience for the product gets older, also their experience matures as well, and that is a huge change. So this is an improvised question, but I want to ask you directly, and it's specifically about Genesis, not the industry as a whole. What is Genesis doing now that we have seen in our space this rise of investors? What is Genesis doing, and how has it changed from, you know, that sort of what is my entertainment value to what is my return on investment since you first started? What are you guys doing to sort of facilitate and, you know, essentially appease the audience that are investors, which we've discovered over the last few years is essential to a trading card game success?
That's actually a conversation that has been back and forth with the team here on Haunted Castle Gaming for 3+ years since I brought a team onto the company because it's a very, very deep and rich conversation. Um, so for us in particular, I I really feel like products need to separate playability and collectability and make those into their own spaces. So we're Canadian. We can talk about this. I like to talk a lot about roll up the rim to win.
Which, can I give some context for that?
All right.
Okay, so I'm going to give some context for anybody else from any other part of the world. Roll Up the Winter Win is a major, basically Canada's version of Starbucks is basically has their cups, and you roll up the lip of the cup to sort of see if there's some sort of investable value. Basically, it's Canada's answer to the McDonald's monopoly in a way. So sorry, Billy's go on.
So it's funny because when I do this conversation with Americans, I always talk about McDonald's monopoly. But uh, talking about Tim Hortons, there's a difference between something that is gambling, strictly gambling, and there's a difference between that and promotional material, something that is exciting to do to get, but at the end of the day, your core product isn't being changed. So the the conversation I have with my team is a lot about, and we're we went on a big discovery process, starting with JLR second edition and trying to figure out with every future set. So, for 2 years now. Uh, so the core product of the game consists of cards with the rarity levels champions and tokens. Those are your the cards you play with. Those are your standard, very very easy to get cards. Then you got commons, uncommons, and rares. Those are your playable components of the game. Every pack you buy should be consistent on the number of commons, uncommons, and rares you get. It should be consistent on the your odds of getting those type of cards. That way, the play component of it is always satisfied on every pack you buy. However, you can have additional cards added into your pack that would increase the odds of getting something that's collectible, that is chase, that is promotional, to make the product a little bit spicier than just getting the base pack. The reason why I bring up a roll of the room to win is because if you want to buy a coffee, you can buy it year round for the exact same price and you get the exact same quality. Especially when it comes to Tim Hortons coffee, not when it comes to their tea. Sometimes their tea is not always the greatest, but the coffee is consistent. Wherever you go, you get the same coffee, the same quality. But then during these particular seasons, particular windows, you can get the coffee and it'll have the roll to win game that you can play and win additional things. That's a promotion. So when it comes to your core, when it comes to your core product, sorry, that's a promotion compared to gambling. It's a promotion because you're still getting your coffee and you're only paying for your coffee. You're not paying extra to participate in the roll of the rim to win. But the moment they start charging you extra for that, now you're setting aside part of that part of your expense to participate in this game where you have a chance of winning or losing. So when I look at the booster pack product, your core product should always be consistent. That's what your player is paying for. That's what the person is expecting to get. If the random variability of getting something nicer is agnostic of that entire core component, then we're talking less about gambling. Not to say we've completely separated ourselves out of gambling, but we're talking less about it. And we're talking about something that's kind of in the middle stage. So yes, investors are very important when it comes to tailoring your product towards them. However, that should not take away from the player's experience. That should not take away from the core game's experience. If you are tailoring your product more and more towards the investors, then I would question how far you've ebbed and flowed between making a pure game to making a product that people are gambling on. And I don't want to find myself too far on that side of the spectrum where the product is just something that people are used for gambling. So I know that was a bit of a ramble and it kind of went everywhere, but it's such a deep topic. And in my mind, I haven't consolidated all my thoughts. What I'm building towards, and I've dropped this term to a lot of different people in a lot of different places, but I haven't come to a clear definition of it, which is ethical collectability. It's this idea of how do you make a product that is in the collectible space, knowing it's in the collectible space without it being too addictive and too much towards the gambling space. Uh, it's such a difficult line to tread, especially for someone like me who I grew up in a very religious household. And for me, gambling has always been one of the most scary vices because I know myself well enough that uh, when it comes to the big three vices that are talked about in religion, gambling, drinking, and drugs, uh, gambling is the one I'm most afraid of. I don't drink, I don't do drugs, I don't gamble. But out of the three, I know personally gambling is the one that I'm the highest risk for. Uh, and when it comes to creating a product, how can I ethically feel comfortable creating something that I don't even think I would be comfortable being part of? So it's such a difficult conversation to find the right answer for. Uh, I think with invasions, with our next set, we've come to a solution that might get us closer there, but I don't think it is solved the problem.
I think with obviously the way that, as I said, the maturity of the audience for these products has come about, this is a necessary conversation. Gambling is an exclusively adult activity, and it's something that is being lent into by sort of the big three or, whatever, especially Magic the Gathering at the moment. They're trying to facilitate it. Now, I do want to speak directly to the audience right now and say this is a very ironic conversation to come up right now. If you look at the previous episode of Booster Pack Throwback, on this network, you're going to find a conversation with Brian Lewis. And Brian Lewis was a unique human being because he was the first lawyer hired by Wizards of the Coast. And he actually discusses his anxiety as the person who had to worry about everything as their lawyer, whether Magic the Gathering would actually be gambling, whether the collectible trading card game model is a form of gambling. And that is a conversation that we have on that episode. And I do encourage you to go check that out because it perfectly threads into the conversation that Sid and myself are having right now. It is this ethical collectability idea possible in a game where there is random chance? When you buy a lottery ticket, that is, you have nothing after it's lost, but when you buy a collectible trading card game, you still have the cards whether you've won, which means you've gotten a rare, or lost, which means you've gotten a less desirable rare. I'm going to pivot back to my conversation with Assad right now, but please go check that out. It will be linked in the description. It is a very valuable and interesting conversation if you're only joining us for this one and you haven't seen it already. Now, Assad, I want to talk back to you.
Absolutely. Can I add something to that previous topic?
Please do.
Something that was a concept that was introduced to me by my wife. She was reading a book about habits. And one of the things they talk about is the way slot machines get you addicted to them is they almost win, where it would be like 7-7 and then a loss. And I've been thinking about that a lot. And in my mind, I'm like, there's no way TCGs are implementing this. It's not possible. You can't have an almost win. And then it hit me, the foil in every pack. The moment your game starts putting a foil in every pack and starts devaluing the foils and creating certain foils that are really high, then the moment you open up your pack and you fan it and you see that there's a foil in there, your brain's gonna hit that idea that I'm gonna win. I'm gonna win. And then you get to that foil and it's nothing nice. And then it's like, but it's shiny. I got something shiny. I almost won. I almost got it. And then it drives you into the next purchase, into the next purchase. And that's a really scary thought to me because these games can be sold to children. These games, like not every TCG is 18 plus. Actually, no TCG is 18 plus. They're 16 plus is on the higher end, 13 plus is the more average, but then you see some that are 8 plus. These are sold to children, and they're getting that dopamine hit of the almost win because they also don't know that it was an almost win. If they open up a booster pack and their shiny card is something that they're excited about, then they've won, even though it's an almost win. So it's the experience of opening up the pack that all of a sudden they're getting addicted to. That is scary.
It is indeed scary, and something that Brian and I talk about, to speak to the episode I was just talking about. Something that Brian and I talk about is the loot box algorithm, where the loot box algorithm is specifically designed in the same way that you're speaking to right there, where you can almost win. You can get something almost, 20% of the time you'll get something that's almost good. 1% of the time you'll get something that is good, and the other 79% of the time you'll get garbage, but those 20% is what catches you. And this is a conversation that Brian and I have in our episode. Now, it is a complex ethical conversation as far as trading card games go, because we haven't really seen anybody truly analyze how deep the gambling addiction reaction from a human being is when it comes to cracking packs. We look at this as a fun sort of thing because that's how we grew up. We're like, oh, nothing's funner than cracking packs. But at the same time, it does deserve to be acknowledged that the reason it is fun is because it is triggering those same emotions that something like pulling a one-hand bandit does. We're going to Vegas and spinning the wheel, or, playing roulette. It is no different. It is a random chance, especially in this world nowadays that we have, where it is a value-centric world. I spoke to James Ernest once, who was originally part of the Magic the Gathering team as early as 1993, and his least favorite question ever to be asked about his time on Magic the Gathering was, how much is this card worth? Because he could see that the world would go in that direction, and it is really disheartening. Now, obviously, he was very aware of what the future held. He knew that, if a 9-year-old is asking him as, like the guy who creates the game, how much the card is worth, which, at that time, Wizards of the Coast wasn't interested in the secondary market, or wasn't presenting publicly as being interested in the secondary market. He knew that eventually, as those children grew up, that would be an instinct that they would lean back on. Now, what I want to talk about with you, though, specifically, is the future. I want to talk to you about the future of Haunted Castle Gaming. I want to talk to you about the future of the trading card game space. We've mentioned that we are going through a bit of a slide, a bearish time in trading card games. And what I really want to know is, how do you, as a leader of one of these companies, see yourself managing Genesis Battle of Champions through the next few years?
Oh, that's something that I am losing sleep over. Because there's this, it's such an interesting topic because we just finished talking about ethical collectability. At the end of the day, there's two paths. There is the easy path of success, which is falling into the same behaviors that we see in other games that can cause that addiction, cause that next purchase, cause that drive. Because at the end of the day, we do need sales. We do need our game to grow. We need more people buying that product. Otherwise, where are we going to get the money to continually fund this project? It's not possible. So on one path, you can make sales that way. But what do you sacrifice in the end? And again, I mentioned I'm not a devout religious man, but I have a religious side to myself. And so my question that I always talk to my team about is, we can go down that path. How much of your soul are you willing to sell to do it? And that the difference is the knowledge. If you're actively knowing that what you're doing is causing harm, and you're doing that in exchange for value, then where does that leave you? Where does that leave your heart, your mind, your soul? So that's one path. The other path is stick to our integrity, stick to the messaging we've had. Try to find that way down of creating a game that is enjoyable, is playable, is fun, and the collectability is still there, but we are doing it in the most ethical way we possibly can, and continuously iterating on that and driving that conversation, even if that means that we die in the end. Is that which path is worth it? Would you rather have the huge success? Like they say that in Shark Tank quite often when they talk about equity. It's like, would you rather have 100% of a grape or 80% of a watermelon? Like, are you willing to sell 20% of your company if it means that it can grow? So the question is, do we go down the path that we can sell a lot of product, and we get that watermelon, but we lose our integrity in the process? Or do we go down the path of maintaining our integrity, but our grape shrivels up and dies? Where do you go down? And that is something that is challenging me all the time. Right now, I do appreciate that our community is rallying behind the decisions we've made. They have been fiercely loyal to the point where they're like, we I had someone say this, and it was such an interesting thing where they're like, bought 12 booster boxes of the newest set of Genesis, but there's nothing more for me to collect. There's no reason for me to buy more product. I want to buy more. I want to support your company, but there's no reason for me to buy more. And they see that as a problem. In my mind, I'm like, that's good. You stop, like, if you're done, if you've found the limit of what you want to purchase for the product, don't feel compelled to spend more. You're good. What you should be doing is bringing in new players and getting them into the game, and that will help us, right? Expand the number of players who are in the game. So I appreciate that. The conversations around Genesis right now have been extremely healthy, especially as we're pushing out new formats, other ways to play the game beyond the one-on-one format. We're pushing out cool new multiplayer formats, or we're doing a dungeon crawler campaign that should be coming out soon. So finding ways to experience your product and enjoy it in different facets without a concentration on collectability, without a concentration on how much am I earning out of this product. It's how much entertainment am I getting out of it. The other side to that conversation is also, as we're moving towards a time of economical decline, there's a lot of challenges that are coming out of this. What people are going to be looking for in the next little while, and this is what I'm hoping will lead to our success, is if you have a certain amount of budget and it's a certain amount of time that you can allocate towards your entertainment or towards something outside of your household, and keeping your savings going and keeping your family living the life they want to live, you have a very, very little time and very little budget remaining. Would you rather spend that on something that fluctuates an investment, or would you rather create an experience, create a memory that you can have with your family, with your friends, with your loved ones, and enjoy that and have that memory for a long time, and that can't depreciate. That's always going to be a good memory. That's what we want to lead. We want to lead the idea that this is a game. Have that experience, have those memories, take those photos, enjoy your life, because that's the most important part of it. So those are the things that we're looking at when it comes to the future of the company. At the end of the day, the fact that we're aware of ethical collectability and we're trying to lead that conversation, I'm hoping that that leads us in the right path and we can save ourselves in that way.
So there's a lot I want to unpack there. I think the main thing I would love to unpack, though, is that you, and I, again, recommend anybody who's watching this episode, go watch my episode with Assad the first time, because it has a very different tenor to the conversation. And we were talking about change today, and your attitude towards the way we recorded back, I think, in November 2021, and your attitude towards the way your company needs to succeed is remarkably different, in my opinion. In that interview, things like collectability was something that was something that was interesting to you, but you were always very player focused. And obviously the market has changed irrevocably since that time we spoke over a year ago now. And it's interesting to see that you have to struggle with the way that the market exists to try and survive. And what I want to call out there is obviously it's challenging, but I think that unfortunately we get into this industry, you spoke to retailers before who were the most lovers of gameplay and games and all that sort of stuff. I think as a trading card game publisher, or these people who are going into the new indie TCG wave, they are sort of the new retailer of the world. They are the ones who are the most engaged. They want to add their perspective on the conversation. I've seen very few indie TCGs, through Kickstarter or through crowdfunding that have that are coming out basically just for the money grab. I've seen a lot of people, though, who are super passionate and believe in their own ideas. And I think that that's really valuable. But as more and more people join this somewhat sinking ship in the current moment, again, there will be a boom in some future time. I want to ask you, and we sort of touched on the boom bust sort of everything so far. I want to ask you, how do you feel as a company owner heading into this, and for a lack of a better term, TCG bust that we're heading into? And do you think that the way, as we aforementioned before, the way that we engage with our communities, whether that's, through Discord, whether that's through crowdfunding or anything like that, the way that we have the agency to directly deal with our customers, will that help games like Genesis, like the other crowdfunded TCGs, survive through this bust and move into a new boom eventually?
Yes, but you gotta be listening for the right things. Listening for why your community loves your game, loves your project. Listen to the deeper conversations that they're having. Because if the conversation that they're having is this game is gonna it's the next investable product or something like that, that's a challenge because investments come and go with the economy. And one of the first things that gets dropped out of people's minds when they're suffering any economical challenges is entertainment. It's a supplementary thing. It's not food, it's not shelter, it's not healthcare. These are the things that get sacrificed first. But the other thing that never goes away, and we can trace this back way before collectible card games or way before cards, is play, gaming. That's a thing that never goes away. And no matter what the challenges are, kids will always find a way to play games, to entertain themselves and have fun in the world that they're in. And adults need that too. We need a way to find that release. So listening to your community, figuring out where their challenges are and how you can adapt to that, that's going to be very important because um, as it goes, one of the one of the first things I did when we started talking about the uh, the world going into this potentially going into a recession, I started doing research as a small business owner. What should you do? And one of the best advice that I read was the first thing you should do is start talking to your vendors, talking upwards to the people who are supporting you and being like, okay, we're going through these challenges. I know you're going through these challenges. We're going through them too. Let's stay in communication. Let's work out different terms. Let's try to keep each other afloat. But it's the other way around as well. You got to talk to your community downstream and figure out, okay, if things are going to get difficult for us as a company, and you are interested in seeing us survive this, let's have a conversation. Let's go back and forth and figuring out what's the best path to success. And the other thing to look at is you mentioned this that like the CEOs are a big figure in their game space. And that's great because when we talk about investing into a company, we talk about you're not investing in the early years of the company, you're not investing into the company, you're investing in the CEO and the team. So it's important that they become the head of that company. But what makes the TCGs thrive is that if I'm a Magic player, like someone who doesn't know the history of Magic, I just got into the game, just starting to play, who's the most important people in about that game? Well, it's Wizards of the Coast. You might know about some of the designers because they're around, but the most important people are the LGS owner, the people you play with, the community. And that's the intention, that's a attention that needs to be shifted out from a lot of these games is away from the head figure. So if you notice, I actually haven't been on an interview for a while. Like it's been 6, 7, 8 months since I've done like a recorded interview. I've made appearances here and there, but the attention that I'm trying to push is uh for the people who are part of the community to give their voice, to be the ones that we're investing into, because then community will then invest into each other, and they'll grow together and support one another, which in the end will support us. But that's the shift that we need to start seeing with these games if they want to survive. It's not about your ego. It's not about making yourself be big. It's about, like, when people talk about Genesis, I'm happy that the name that comes up, one of the names that comes up the most is Will K. He's such a big, important person of this community, but he doesn't work for the company. He just loves the game with a passion that he will be there to help it grow wherever. But he's not part of the company, and he's just a big fan, and that's his name should hold more weight than mine ever would or ever should. Um, it's not about it's about the people who really make this game, which is the players, which is the community, it's the fans. Um, they're the most important part of the equation.
So my takeaway from that statement is that, we talked before about building a community, like ultimately, launching, we talked about how the TCG lifespan from a distributor perspective is merely a year. And building a community obviously doesn't seem to be the real thread that trading card game, manufacturers need to worry about. But I think the value that Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Magic have all seen over the last few years is that they've fortified a community. They've cultivated a community that has come together and wants to stay together through the access of a lifestyle game. And I think that is incredibly valuable lesson to take away from our episode today. I think, obviously we've talked about, people like, getting out there and sort of showing off their game and demoing it at conventions and stuff like that. But that value is only instantaneous. It disappears the second that person walks away from that demo table. But if they can try it out, have the experience, and get into a world that they feel like that they fit into, fortified by a community that already exists, I think that that's where true success comes from. It's not about shilling, the shiniest cards. It's about cultivating a community that wants to stay together and stay together through the product in which you create. And I have to say that today has been an incredibly enlightening conversation. It has been something that I have been absolutely looking forward to, and I didn't know it would go down some of the paths that it did, but I'm so glad it did, because I feel like this is a kind of conversation that isn't being had. Obviously, we talked before about the things that get clicks, or which is negativity or money or all that sort of stuff as the industry evolves, but I'm so glad that you're willing to join me today, Assad, and be so earnest and be so open with your opinions. You are vulnerable as well as a leader of a trading card game, and I think especially as we come into a world where people, literally anybody, can create their own trading card game nowadays and put it on Kickstarter, this is the sort of information that I feel like needs to be out there. How many people see it? Who knows? But it is there for people to find. So before we leave, I do want to say, it wouldn't be appropriate if we didn't leave without trying to tell people who may have only just met you through this episode, or perhaps my earlier episode, where they could find Genesis if they're interested in not just supporting the game itself, not just supporting you, but fortifying the community that already exists for Genesis. So tell us a little bit more where the listeners can sort of try out Genesis, where they can dabble in it and find out if it's the game for them.
So GenesisBOC.com, so GenesisBattleChampions.com or GenesisBOC.com. On there, you've got links to everything. There's a Discord community it's a fan Discord community. So we've talked about, every game needs to have a Discord community. I never wanted us to be the ones who created it. It's the fans who made it. They moderate it. They own it. And that's perfect. So the fan Discord community is great. There's print and play decks on the website because we want you to play the game, experience it, love it, and then invest into it, then buy product for it, because we don't want to take your money if you don't love the product. So there's print and play decks on the website. There are everything's there. And then I'm actually trying my best to become more active on Twitter. So I am 99% sure that it's Genesis BOC, or it's either Genesis BOC or Genesis_BOC. I can't remember off the top of my mind.
It'll be linked in the description, by the way.
So that will be, if you want to see my random ramblings throughout the day, then that's the place to join me. But otherwise, join the community. They will lead you in the direction of where to go because they want to see it grow and survive, and will work together to make that happen.
Excellent. No, I do want to talk to the listeners, obviously, right now. Assad just mentioned his Twitter feed, and I think it is unique in amongst the sort of TCG Twitter feeds as well, because, I mean, if you're willing to go on Twitter at the moment, I realize it's a bit of a tumultuous place at the moment, it is worth following, because not only do they talk about Genesis, but they also open up the conversation, like the one we've just had today. Assad asks on a daily basis about, you know, what your experiences are, wants to know about what makes trading card games interesting to you, so please check that out. I'm going to say as well, obviously, I'm going to link it in the description. I'm not going to go into specifics here, but there is a bunch of socials you can follow either myself or the Booster Pack Network on. Please check those out if you're interested in sort of learning and more, having more of a deeper involvement in the kind of conversation that we're having today. Before we leave, I do want to throw back to you, Assad, and say thank you so much for joining me. It has been an absolute pleasure to talk about, you know, this deep topic and sort of get your sort of personal experience as somebody who has experienced this in such a unique sort of vision. You aren't a creator who came along through the COVID wave. You aren't a creator who, you know, is basically a flash in the pan. You're somebody who wanted to use the word again, fortify your experience with trading card games because of your passion. And I just want to say thank you. And before I do, I just want to say goodbye from me. Goodbye from you.
All right, goodbye.
Thank you so much. Again, if you want to check us out, will find us all linked in the description. And please check out our sponsor, which is Category 1 Games. If you're interested in many of the things I talk about, like the history of collectible games, they sell a lot of classic collectible card games. And one of the things, if you are interested in creating your own trading card game, is being aware of what is out there already. So please go check that out. That is it from me and Assad, of course. And until next time, please remember, keep shuffling.